Robin Zander, scene A1.
Hello and welcome back to Snafu with Robin Zander. Today, it's a little bit of something different. I'm sitting down with a longtime friend and collaborator of mine, Miki Johnson, for a different kind of conversation, maybe even a debate. Miki is the former founder and CEO of a really incredible employee brand studio called Job Portraits. She moved away from the Bay Area after working in Silicon Valley and in technology for more than 15 years. And she and her husband have some unusual approaches to AI and to technology in general. So I'm sitting down for almost a debate about whether we should be using AI, how we should be using AI. I hear frequently from people who are a little bit more Luddites or perhaps from boomers that they've never used AI. But everyone I know who's my age, who's a working professional, is using AI as a part of their daily lives every day. And so I thought it would be a little bit interesting to talk about the ethical use of AI with my friend and somebody whose opinions about leadership and about life and about parenting I have a lot of respect for, but views about AI are, if not diametrically opposed to my own, then very different and a different kind of voice. So please enjoy this debate about the utility and ethics of artificial intelligence and LLMs with my friend, Miki Johnson. Miki Johnson, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Robin. I'm excited about this.
We just got back in touch. We've known each other for 10 years, but a couple of weeks ago, we sat down for a very quick 15, 20-minute call and pretty much spent the entire time almost debating the utility of AI. So I wanted to get on a proper recorded interview with you and talk about your beliefs about AI and the world today. Because I know people in my life, like maybe, particularly boomers and my parents and right people who are not in the working world, who are have never touched LLMs, have never touched AI. But I don't know very many people, especially living adjacent to Silicon Valley as I do, who are adamantly opposed. But you and your husband you're raising your kids very, tech thoughtful, which I heartily agree with. And you yourself have never used AI and say that you never will. So let's start with that. Why do you believe that? And maybe give a little bit of also your credentials as to, you are not tech illiterate, quite the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off by saying I might have said that I will never use it, but what I'm clear about currently is just that I haven't used it, and I have very serious reservations about it. But, I'm trained as a journalist. I ran my own businesses for many years. I am a leadership coach currently. I consider myself a deeply curious person, and try to help other people be curious. I also consider myself someone who works very hard to hold paradox, right? To be able to say that things are like both one thing and their opposite. So I'm certainly not coming in as like A, any kind of expert, obviously, but B, as like it has to be this one way, and I'm only thinking about it this one way. But I'm happy to talk about like how I'm thinking about it currently and why, because I do think that it's fairly different from the sort of major camps that most people fall into these days, right? Which I think is, so like a little bit about my background. We know each other because I spent 12 years in the Bay Area from 2008 to 2020.
It's
Working.
fun. I forget that we moved to the Bay at the same time. I moved to San Francisco in 2007, 2008 as well.
Yeah. And, I moved there for a job at a startup that was all about websites for photographers, right? I was coming into journalism I graduated in 2005 from journalism school. I mean, I was coming in where like digital technology was absolutely transforming in one way, or you could say cratering in another, right? Like the whole economy that I was coming into. My first week of school was September 11th, which was the first war that was covered by digital cameras, right? I took
Oh, wow.
I took photo
Yep.
J schools. I took photo J classes in school that were like we had like the first digital DSLRs that we got to use. I mean, I really like my early career was within San Francisco, specifically within publishing, right? These spaces that were being absolutely blown apart by technology and changes. And I was, I was in my early 20s. Like, of course, I was on the vanguard of that, right? So I got hired
Right.
by a startup that made websites for photographers, editable
It's
websites that you could change yourself. Like,
it's
what a
funny.
new concept.
Even as you describe that, I mean, I remember being in Photoshop in like college classes during high school,
Yeah,
and the earliest days, not maybe the earliest days, but very early Photoshop. As I was learning to develop film in darkrooms, right?
right.
Like I did both at the same time, very much that transition. But you said things were changing so quickly, and I can't help but think also Responsive Conference 2025 was last week. Uh, the rate of change is accelerating now, infant, like just so much faster than it was then. At the time, it felt like things were changing faster then, but
Totally.
now things are changing day to day versus, almost decade to decade, 2 decades ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other big change is that I'm now in my 40s, right? I have young kids. I have two little boys that are 6 and 3. And I've had the benefit of watching what technology and the company and the people who run it and the companies that create it, and the economic systems that incentivize it have done to people's brains, to our ability to connect as humans, to our democracy, to our ability to have meaningful, challenging conversations with people that we respect but disagree with.
I've been saying since 2005 or 2007 that I don't really see how a democracy or any sort of government institution that was built pre-internet can survive the rise of the internet. And I say that as a relentless optimist. I say that as somebody who deeply believes in democracy and in people's ability to vote. And I just can't fathom that, maybe the Constitution was revolutionary. It was revolutionary at its time, but it is out of date for the internet world we live in today. And maybe that's sacrilege to say in the United States of America, but given how communication works today, I don't see how things continue based on how they were pre-internet, right? And just to set the stage, I think you and I definitely agree. You mentioned kids. I don't have kids yet, but my fiance and I want kids. The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt's work, and others about technology, right, will go into how you're raising your boys sans technology or very, very thoughtfully and limited. But I don't believe social media is good for children. um, and if social media is exponentially beyond the internet, right? If social media is bigger than the printing press, I believe that AI is bigger than the wheel for humankind, right? Nor do I believe that the people and their, handful of individual people in charge of the direction of AI, right? The way I often say it is, I am in awe of AI. I don't believe that Sam Altman, right, the CEO of OpenAI and ChatGPT, has Robin Zander's best interest at heart. He is absolutely masterful at what he does, and we can talk about some of what he's known for. I think that's an interesting subtopic that I'm really fascinated about. But I don't think that he is looking out for you and me and for your boys and for my future children.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And I guess maybe that can bring us back to where I was going very slowly in relationship to your first question. But I think I see two big camps in like people I interact a lot with, which is my friends from the Bay Area. So since living in the Bay Area, I moved back to my small hometown of Athens,
Oh,
Ohio. Yeah.
just to brag about you, I mean, I know it's in the past now, but you built a 15-person agency that sold into name brand technology companies.
Yeah,
How
I
many
mean,
how many
yes,
employees did you and your husband have in your heyday?
yeah, so my husband Jackson and I started an employer branding agency called Job Portraits. We started it in 2014, the same year we got married. And yeah, over 8 years grew it to, yeah, I think we probably had 15 or so full-time employees and another 20 contractors that we worked with really consistently. We got, because of the timing, we were really in at the earlier days of the second big, like really
Yep.
boom, right, in
Yep.
startups and in the Bay Area. And we got some really lucky breaks early on where, I mean, we worked with DoorDash, we worked with Instacart, we worked with Eventbrite when they were all under 200 people.
Wow.
So, I mean, we were in Chicago building our own startup before that. The first year that Uber was expanding to other cities outside of San Francisco, we were in a co-working space with the Uber in Chicago that was like setting up the drivers. I mean, so yeah, we had a real insider front seat view of the huge growth, the potential, the excitement, the possibilities of those early
Right.
days of that sort of second wave, right?
All
In
to
the Bay Area.
say, you and Jackson both savvy operators, right? That is a sizable agency for two people to be running, and you are very familiar with technology, right? You are not a layperson when it comes to the impact of technology on humans. So I interrupted you.
Yeah,
Please keep going
yeah, thank you. I
into.
think that's helpful context. But so since moving back to where I'm from, which is really sweet, progressive college town, public university, Ohio University in Athens. It's kind of like a very small Austin, right? So we're a little blue dot and a lot of red around here, but it's beautiful. It's where I grew up. I'm very lucky to get to come back here. But so I sort of have like all my friends that are still in the Bay Area, still in tech, and they are all, yeah, I mean, they've been using AI from the very earliest days, right? Partially because it is required in their job, or they are the kinds of people who are building it, or they are leaders at the companies that are building it, right? Like I
Right.
have like those friends for sure. So I've been seeing it coming for quite a while and paying attention to it. And in that world, yeah, the idea that someone has not used it is just like it's mind blowing. Like you were like your eyes went, what? Like
Yeah.
you had to ask me. You were like,
I,
did
I
you?
asked you a second. Did
Yeah, you were like,
we
did
were
you
having a
just
conversation on
say?
Zoom, and
Yeah,
I say, "Wait, did I just hear you say that you have never used
right,
AI,
right. Yeah,
Mickey? Did
like
I
does
did
that
I
it
hear that?"
doesn't compute, right? Like I
Right.
get it. And honestly, if I were doing anything other than running my own business that is like a coaching business, right? That is just me talking to people, and not an advisory consulting business, right? Not where I'm going in and telling leaders what they should be doing, because
Of
every
course.
consultant everywhere is telling people how to use the AI. That's like their
Of
only
course.
job right now, right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I just happen to be in this very particular little work situation where I am not required to use AI. And Jackson just happens to have spent his last year working at a zero technology K through 12 school, that he helped make zero technology, right? Like as the director of operations. So we just happen to be in these like very tiny pockets of the economy where you can still get away with like not doing AI every day.
Yeah.
So I want to recognize that like as much of the reason that I'm here has to do with just luck, right? And my work
Sure.
as some kind of
But
grand
so
moral
the
like
just
objection.
just to dig into it, like
Yeah.
there's a couple of different things, right? I ran Robin's Cafe from 2016 to 2019. When I
Yeah.
started, most of the restaurant industry was still on paper timesheets,
Mm,
right? I got to know a small company that was doing digital timesheets in 2016 in Chicago. They were a couple of guys dropped out of high school to start it because they worked restaurants and saw that it was paper and were like, we could build this. By the time I sold Robin's Cafe on Craigslist to the current owners of Robin's Cafe, they had sold their timesheet restaurant company to a global conglomerate and retired at the ages of 24, 26. when I got to know them, I could literally call these two guys up on the phone to report that their timesheet software was malfunctioning,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can still run a restaurant on paper timesheets, but why the hell would I if I can use digital timesheets that my employees can check from their phones?
Yeah.
That's not to say that I think that my nephews, right, or your sons should have iPhones at the age of 5 or 10, but it's not denying also the utility of being able to use digital timesheets, right? Or a different analogy, different metaphor, uh, the printing press versus handwriting. I still think better when I handwrite than when I type. And I still think better when I type than when I dictate. But all three of those are useful mechanisms that I use to put words onto a screen or onto paper.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think your question here, right, if something makes your life easier and better, why not use it?
Well, I write not just to communicate my ideas, but to figure out my ideas. If all I did you and I don't, and so I write a weekly newsletter called Snafu. It comes
Mhm.
out every weekend. It's 1,000 words every single week. I write every single word of that.
Mhm.
I also use AI to be like, hey, help me improve my writing as an editor. But
Mhm.
every word that it comes out there and on social is words that I've written or written and then revised and rewritten.
Yeah. And why is that important to you? Like, why do you do it that way
Because it
rather than?
trains my brain, because
Mhm.
I like how I think more clearly when I write regularly,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? But that's not to say don't use AI, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's not to say don't, if I had an editor who could follow me around constantly and point out anytime I had a typo, great, sure, right? But that's a full-time job of a full-time assistant that I have never been able to have, right? And so my writing has improved faster, my thinking has improved better as a result of being able to use LLMs to review my writing on a regular basis. I have to continually remind ChatGPT and Gemini that and Claude, right? That like I'm not asking you to write for me. Please do not write for me, right? I've trained
Mhm.
instances of ChatGPT specifically in the kind of editorial I want,
Mhm.
but it's still useful as a tool.
Mhm. Yeah. Why have you never had an editor like follow you around and help you be a better writer?
Oh, I certainly have, right? But an
Mhm.
editor who charges, somewhere between 25 and $150 an hour can and generally will give me feedback a week from now rather
Mhm.
than 3 seconds from now, right?
Mhm.
So I'm working on a book proposal. I hired an editor who worked with me on that. Then she was no longer available and I could no longer afford her and I just needed more quick feedback iterations. And so I resorted to Claude.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think these are all the kinds of decisions that we all make 100 times a day, right? These are like cost benefit analysis, these are trade-off analyses. But I think one of the things that like really unsettles me about AI, and I should say that I see AI as like it's just sort of like the ultimate
Right? It's the latest encapsulation
yeah,
of
evolution,
this,
right?
right?
Of a trend that has been happening since the printing press, right? Like it's hard
Yeah,
to say like
before, since
where
writing
you
in caves.
yeah, like where do you
Yeah,
slice this, right? And on the progression, but I do think that it is such a powerful technology and it's moving so fast that it's sort of throwing the cover off of some of the problematic logical fallacies that we have been sort of slowly adopting over and over and over again.
totally.
And one of them that I hear in what you just said is that if something is like cheaper and faster and easier, it's not necessarily better than work like you're smart enough to know that like there are things you're going to get out of working with a human,
Oh,
right?
totally.
That you wouldn't get out of like this other tool that's faster and easier and relatively approaching zero in cost. But we really, I don't think, are paying enough attention to the costs of that switch. And I think the main reason that we don't pay attention to the cost is because of capitalism, right, is because of the economic system that we are caught in. And I
Yep.
also don't want to be one of those like strident progressives who says that like late stage capitalism is an absolute negative thing,
As far
right?
as I can tell, it's the best of a bunch of bad systems.
Right, exactly. It's the least bad option of a lot of them. But there is this very particular thing that capitalism does, which is that it would really like humans to be machines,
Yeah.
right? It would
Yeah.
really like for everything in the system to be predictable, inexhaustible, free or cheap, um, mistake free, right? And because of that, humans have been making themselves more and more those things, right, over time to adapt to the incentives of the economic system. And now we have a tool that, whether it's there or not, and whether you believe it will get all the way there, is very likely to essentially be a human without all of those annoying human traits, right?
Sure.
Like
Yep.
let's be honest. And what is
No, I mean, I
actually
think there's
doing that?
a high likelihood that our grandchildren, if the human race makes it that long, and I say that with some amount of seriousness,
Yeah.
date robots, right? Like, I just got engaged, right? 2 generations from now, are humans, dating, marrying, falling in love with? I mean, they're already falling in love with ChatGPT, right? But is it actually socially acceptable and assumed that we, have robot spouses?
Yeah. Yeah, and it already is. I mean, it's some really high number of people, I think, under the age of 25 that have had, what they consider meaningful conversations and interactions with AI companions. It's like,
Yep.
it's I think it's well over 20% or something like that, and that will only grow, right? I mean, we're talking about the very earliest stage days. Yeah, and I guess like part of it too is when we say things like that in 10, in 5 years, will it be people marrying? Like we say it as if we don't have agency over that,
Sure.
right? Like we say it as if, and this is one of my big frustrations with this whole situation is that it's being positioned to us as a foregone conclusion that AI has to consume everything, be
Sure.
everywhere, do everything, right? And
Well,
that has been constructed very intentionally and thoughtfully by the people who are building it, who stand to make unimaginable amounts of money from it, right? Like, so Jackson has been reading mostly the comments of Hacker News religiously for the past 15 years, and has watched like the people building this technology. I mean, if you're not familiar with Hacker News, right? Like it is one, do you know Hacker News? I
of
mean,
course.
right.
Yeah, of
So it's
course.
like, it's one of the few forums online that I think is still really valuable and like a pretty thoughtful place, largely because it's incredibly highly curated, right? But it's, the people who are there are largely the people who have been like running the tech world and like actually building these platforms for years. It's a
Hmm.
ton of engineers and people like that. And it's been very clear from that and other things, right, that you can see publicly, that like the people building AI knew that there would be resistance to it. Because when you really pause and think about it, it's gross. Like, it is trying to replace humans and it is going to replace all of their jobs. And no one is really talking about like what's going to happen when that happens, right?
Right.
And like
So,
I'm sorry, but like we can do all we want of like everyone's their own human and everyone gets to have their own experience and like all of our like progressive everybody gets to have their things, but like there is something deep inside of me that says that dating a robot is bad for
I
humanity.
don't
Like,
disagree.
it is wrong, right? We are doing
Well,
all.
is different than human, right? Is like,
Yeah, like yeah, again,
and
right, like
if
every part of me is like, don't say it's bad, don't say it's wrong. We have to like create space for other people to be
well,
different. But
it's different than human, right? And if you believe, as I do, that there is something deeply sacred, right? I'm not a particularly religious person, but I guess I'm a particularly sacred person, and I think that there's
yeah,
something fundamental and special about humanity and the human soul. And for us to be, I mean, I have, from a broken ankle at 19, hardware in my foot, and like, like I'm have members of my extended family who are only alive due to insulin pumps, and right, like,
yeah,
but the idea of humans being replaced by machines or subsumed by machines is feels wrong to me. It feels, is not something I want, is not a world I want to live in,
yeah,
and maybe two generations from now, again, if we make it that long, our grandchildren will look back and say what we say to, what I say to my parents of, okay, boomer, you've never used AI. Like, that's fine. You're retired now. You made yours. But I want to bring it back to like the very tangible. So my fiance and I just bought a house.
mm-hmm.
I am a crazy person, so I did hundreds, if not 1,000 hours of research about a couple of the different houses that we looked at that we didn't buy. One of those houses had a redwood tree that had been cut down sometime before we were looking at the house, in front of the house, maybe 10 feet from the foundation, and the foundation in the garage was ruptured. I talked to a bunch of arborists. I talked to a bunch of contractors. The chimney in the house was out of alignment, so it was clear there was something going on with the foundation. But the reason we ended up not buying that house is because I sat down with ChatGPT's deep research for an hour, paying the $200 a month for the, as many deep research queries as I want, right? And if you haven't used deep research, at least you do know what it is. But for
Yeah,
folks listening, right, it's the ability to plumb the depths of the internet and what ChatGPT has access to research a specific topic and not just do a superficial layer. And it returns from a simple query, it asks a few clarifying questions, and then returns an essay instead of a paragraph about your query. I spent several hours, probably 15 deep research queries happening simultaneously, right? I'm like, I probably pumped out 250 pages of research about the impact of redwood tree roots, alive or dead, on the foundation of a house.
mm-hmm.
And did you know that if the tree roots are still alive, they can keep growing and cause more upheaval? If they are dying, then they will eventually decompose. Every year they will absorb more water and decrease in size, absorb. And so you have this growing and expanding and contracting of the soil. And I mean, again, I can go on about this for
Sure,
hours because I
yeah,
know a lot.
yeah,
But eventually, what you're left with is these pockets of air underneath your house, such that if there was a minor earthquake, those pockets of air would crumble and the whole house under those areas would, the foundation would crumble further, and you would be stuck with a house that has a very unstable foundation.
mm-hmm.
None of this a real estate agent could tell us. None of this a contractor told us. Even the arborists kind of like said, "Oh yeah, you'd have to dig out those tree roots to find exactly what's going on." But we ended up very clearly not buying that house because of the ChatGPT deep research that I read and tested again. In some ways, I could do that research or not. Hopefully, the person who bought that house and it did sell won't have those issues or will have explored how to handle them. But like, to protect myself, I want to use the tools that I have available, right? I want to like use laser sights at the bottom of a floor to make sure the floor is level. And if it's not, figure out why it's not before I buy the house. That's just kind of like standard practice in, earthquake territory in California when you're questioning the stability of a house. If I'm going to use a laser level, why not use ChatGPT deep research to explore things that I don't know, right? In the same way that I literally like was lucky enough in my childhood to have a encyclopedia, a whole set of Britannicas,
Mm-hmm.
and would flip to the D's and randomly read about dinosaurs for, hours when I was your son's age.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, right? How do we handle, I mean, it's trite but true, the people, it's not that AI is going to replace us, at least not short term. It's the people using AI are going to replace the people not using AI, right? It's the fact that Tyler Cowen, the economist from George Mason University, wrote about this in The Average is Over in, I think it was 2012, which, as computers got better at chess, this was again in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, they still were not as good as a really good chess player and a really good chess computer playing together. And so, yes, computers can beat humans at chess generally these days, but actually much, much stronger than just a computer playing chess is a human and a computer together. And so the best chess in the world today is played by a human and computer against human and computer collaborating together, doing their respective things.
Yeah, I mean, man, there's a dozen directions I could go from there. One thing is that I think that we will increasingly have to make a choice between knowledge and relationships. So what you were doing by doing deep research is you were sort of like valuing getting the right answer, getting more information, knowing more, being able to make a better decision over building relationships with more people. So the people you talked to didn't have the answers that you were looking for, but I'm willing to bet that all of the information in deep research came from a human.
Came from people
Right.
originally, yeah.
So I presume that there are like humans you could talk to that would have been able to like give you that information. Also, like just like a broader point, and I will preface this by saying that like most of my work that I do as a coach and a guide and in my own personal life is around getting comfortable with uncertainty, right? Like building more of a relationship with mystery. And I know you just were talking with Simone. It was a great interview. So like
this is Simone Stolzoff. He was our opening keynote at Responsive Conference last week, wrote the book, A Good Enough Job, and has a new book coming out, just to plug his book for a second, How to Not Know, which is coming out next year.
Yeah, which sounds awesome. And I can't wait to read. And I totally was on board with a lot of what he was saying, but like, because of the I'm not even going to remember. My brain is not working right now of like what it's called, but like I want to call it the intellectual revolution, right? But like I think, therefore I am, right? Like that whole enlightenment. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Because in my mind, we are at sort of the ultimate throes of enlightenment, of like pure enlightenment thinking. If you are entirely within the idea that to know more is necessarily better, then absolutely AI makes total sense. But where I am is that I am very concerned about our lack of relationships and our lack of
Ditto.
ability to interact with other humans and
Yep.
what that's meaning for things like democracy and people's mental health and the world and the way that we treat the earth. I think those are all connected to the fact that we have a lot more trouble having just relationships with one another. And so every time that we choose to do an AI research search or we choose to use it to edit something, I understand 100% why you would do all those things within the constraints of this very fucked up version of capitalism that we live in right now.
Yep.
Right? Like, I get it. And again, privileged position to not have to be using this just to keep my job, which is most people I know. But we will continue to have to make a choice between talking to another human being and doing an AI search. That is just the choice. And it's a choice. I'm not saying one is wrong or right, but I'm choosing relationships.
Right. I think that's a false dichotomy, right? I ran Responsive Conference last week. We had 250 people in the room, right? It was all about not just tactics and tools, it's about connections, right? The reason I do this podcast is so I can sit down with people like you, whether I know them or not, to explore ideas, right? In doing my real estate research, I talked to probably 300 professionals across every domain, right? I'm, like, as I say, a crazy person, and I treat real estate as an entrepreneurial endeavor, which most people don't, and I recommend doing. So I have my electrician, I have my plumber. I
Sure.
talked to 25 different roofers and had many of them come out, a couple of them to that house, but many of them to the house we ended up buying. I'm the biggest proponent of talk to humans, right? And why not use the tools that are available? Or if you want to attack it a different direction, right? How how do we do both, right? Like, I refuse to believe that it's a dichotomy of like, because ultimately what I hear and what you say is like, okay, well then I guess we should not use computers too, because computers aren't as good as handwriting. And then if we're only writing by hand, should we not use the printing press, right? Like, there is an argument against technology, which, back to, I don't have kids yet, but I will have to, and my partner, who is a data scientist, and I have started to talk about how are we going to handle technology with our children? How are we going to handle screens?
Right.
Given that, you know, mom and dad work on their screens, right? That's where I do a majority of my work. AI is built into the tools that we use to make videos at Zander Media all day long, right? Adobe and all of the tools that we use to both record and to post produce videos, which is the majority of the thing that we sell these days, has these tools built in. But privileged or not, like, what's the answer? How do we, of course, talk to more humans? Of course, get out in the world. Of course, get your hands in the dirt. And we do live in a world that is, as you said, fucked up, right? Or right, like, and so how should people? How do you advise your clients when you're coaching with people? I'm like, treat me as your client. Like, okay,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but I'm on Zoom and I make videos, and I, you know, would have gotten a less good deal on my house, which is to say, I might have bought a house that would have bankrupted me had I not
Hmm.
done that research. What do you
Hmm.
advise?
Yeah. I don't advise anything. I mean, I'm a coach, not an advisor. That's what I just kept kind of saying is like, thank God I'm not a consultant or an advisor, because I would not want to be telling anybody. My whole job is to help people trust their own decision making and insights and intuition, and not look for outside validation, for even thoughts that are incredibly contrarian. And if I'm doing anything here in this conversation, other than like, I'm still figuring this out too, right? Like, my whole orientation all the time is like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, right? I mean, Jackson and I talk a lot about strong opinions loosely held, right? Like,
Of
I
course.
always want new information to be able to change my mind, and it can and it will. In talking to people like you, I mean, I have this conversation with every single person that I can, because I want to know how other people, other parents, other people working in tech, right? Like, how other people, I have friends that are like engineers using the technology, right? Or being put out of jobs by the technology, or like, I want to
Right.
know it from every angle to try and understand it and think differently about it. But what I would like to do here is just to say that it doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion, right? Like, that's what worries me about people that live in places like the Bay Area, where it's like, if you've literally never met a person who's never used them, never used an LLM. I mean, just to say, of course, I've interacted with AI. You can't not, right? When you do a
Every
Google
time you
search,
search
it's
Google,
there.
right?
Every time
It
that you use a
that is an
chatbot, like,
LLM now.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it's been embedded in this stuff for years and years and years. I'm not, sort of, I don't not recognize that part of it, but I'm not actively, right, like, going and doing ChatGPT searches or building my own, like, LLM, right? I don't even know the right terminology, but I'm not using all of those tools. But is just to be like, you can make different decisions, and the the way of thinking about it that's helped me the most, and I am a little hesitant to bring this up because I have not researched it myself as deeply as I would like to. So I'm just going to say this is a surface level understanding. And if there are other people that have deeper understandings of it, then, like, I apologize for what I'm getting wrong. But my understanding of how the Amish deal with technology,
Yep. I was going to
is,
raise the Amish.
yeah, is like, and like, sort of AI Amish is like loosely how I describe myself, right? And And so what I understand about it is not that the Amish are patently against all technology that has happened, right?
No, they're very thoughtful about the incorporation of technology that fosters community and opposed to technology that doesn't.
Right. They have very clear values for what works for them and what doesn't. And they have people that actually go out and see and test and like interact with new technology so they can make informed decisions, right, about whether or not it will actually meet with their values. And one of
Right.
their very big, strong values is, does it build connection or not? So, like, we live really close to a lot of Amish communities here in Ohio. And if you go there, they are all riding electric bikes.
Oh,
That is
cool.
very new since when I was a kid, right?
Whoa.
They have adopted new technology just within my lifetime at a very large scale. Um, and I haven't talked to them or like whatever, but I can imagine that it's like it's not hurting the environment. It actually allows them to like meet each other and connect with each other. They have had solar power for a long time, so like
Yep.
it's not that they don't have any electricity, right? But it's within their own bounds. They're not interacting with this like larger economic system that is against their values to be able to produce it. And so I just like again, I what one of the things that bothers me is that this narrative, I didn't get to finish telling this story earlier, but the people who are building AI have been very consciously creating the narrative of inevitability for at least the past decade because they knew there would be inherent resistance.
Hmm.
And as long as they said, this is just going to happen, it's just the natural progression, and your jobs will not be, your jobs will not be taken by AI. They'll be taken by the people who know AI better than you. I
which
mean,
which is also that's clearly false, at least by my experience, right? It's like, yeah,
yeah,
short term,
for short term,
but
and
but
then
but yeah, and
and
then
then
the
the next
next
step is
step,
it will be
right?
taken by the AI,
Right.
right?
I
Like,
mean, we said the same thing about Uber and Lyft coming to San Francisco and now to the world, where,
yeah,
right? And I too remember
yeah.
when
And now
Uber
you have
was
Waymo,
just,
right?
right.
Like,
Now you've got all of those drivers rapidly getting replaced by cars that don't need drivers.
yeah. So I just, again, like the idea that you're going to believe what people who have proven over and over and over again to be driven by a profit motive, right? That you
Yeah.
are going to believe what they have to say about why and how this is going to happen. I just like I find it really I don't know, like unsettling. And I get it, right? Because we are so stressed out. We are so worried about money. Our nervous systems are just lit up 24 hours a day, especially under the current administration, right? The idea that people have the bandwidth to stop and think critically about this, right? Like I get why more people are not doing it, especially if every single person around you is doing it and it's necessary for their job, right? But that's what like gets to me almost more than anything is that when I really talk to people for long periods of time, and I haven't heard this from you, so like I'll be curious to hear how you respond to this. There's always this moment where it's in some way they say, yeah, but I feel like I have to, right? Like, yes, of course there's problems with it. And of course I'm concerned about job loss and whatever. But if I don't, I will lose my job, right? Or if I don't, I would have bought the wrong house. Or if I
So I
don't,
have that
right?
with, let's say, TikTok, right?
Yeah.
I went on TikTok in the early days. I found myself staying up until 3 in the morning with my mild ADHD,
Yeah.
flipping through videos. And after a couple of weeks, deleted the app and haven't gone back.
Yeah.
There may be business that I lose by not catering to a TikTok audience, by not promoting the work that
Yeah.
Xander Media does on TikTok.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to build a system that removed me from that platform while still using that platform.
Yeah.
Versus, I feel like with a newsletter or LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn was our primary method of communicating with attendees of Responsive Conference
Yeah.
last week, right, for 2025. So I feel like in certain domains, I definitely have to choose between, the lesser of two evils, or, and I totally think that TikTok, is bad for my brain.
Yeah.
I'm not using it. With LLMs, I don't think, let's just say in the researching houses,
Sure.
I didn't feel like I had to, or else I would not keep up. right? It feels like if, encyclopedias are available, use them. If Wikipedia is available, use both. And if LLMs can help me with the research, all three of these are useful avenues for inquiry, right?
When
But
was
I
the last time you
totally,
opened an encyclopedia?
7 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's a nice idea that we're going to keep using all of the tools, but the way that humans actually work is like we will use the thing that is the easiest. And then the other thing, I mean, if you look on eBay, you see how many encyclopedias you
Right.
can buy. Like, no one's using them, right?
Right.
Like,
But it's easier to get ingredients to get your people in my movement and fitness world say get your macros, but like to eat at McDonald's than make home cooked meals 3 meals a day, right? You and I don't even know if we've ever talked about it, but I'm pretty sure we share values and look at the obesity issue in the catastrophe that is obesity in the United States with a Paul, right? So like just because something's easy, right? Getting in my cold plunge is not easy, and I do it every morning specifically because it's really, really damn hard, and it never stops being hard, right? Same with exercise ultimately. So where are we doing things because they're hard, and where are we doing things because they are, yeah, right? Like I don't know. I grew up in the mountains. I love spending time at elevation and away from electricity. And even though I could bring Starlink, I don't.
yeah,
I
yeah,
also don't want to live at 10,000 feet in a log cabin with, wood burning stove and, away from everybody, 12 months of the year.
yeah.
Right. So, like,
I think this is also maybe a place where it would be helpful to start to think about the differentiation between like what are you and I, right? As like
sure.
privileged adults with like fully formed brains, right? Like what are we
Right.
doing?
Well,
That's
let's go to what are you doing with your boys, right? I
yeah.
want to be respectful of the time. Clearly, we could do this for
I was
hours,
going to say I
right?
was like
Uh,
this is really like a 4 hour conversation, but we can
but
start
what
it.
are you practicing? And maybe even even though you don't give advice professionally, I'll ask that you give advice personally. Um, you're raising kids, and I can think of no harder time in certainly our lives and probably even back to our grandparents or great grandparents' lives to like figure out, right? On the one hand, there's like no technology schools. On the other hand, there's alpha schools, which I'm equally interested in, which say, okay, use AI to help kids learn as quickly as possible the, rhetoric and arithmetic and writing, and that can be the information tutor, and then all of the rest of the time that kids spend in alpha schools, as I understand it, and alpha schools are on the rise across the US, people can research them, is human coaches doing practicing life skills. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's not useful for, I believe, for a 6 year old to memorize times tables anymore. Like, I don't think that was ever the best way to learn. It was how I was taught math. The only reason that I came to love math is because my dad spent time outside of the times tables helping me understand algebra, right? He was that coach.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking about with your boys, and what advice would you give me as a future parent?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, like I never want to give any parents any advice because like we are all just doing the best we possibly can with like limited resources and information. And look, my boys are not even close to the age where they are asking for phones or right. This is like I do not have teenagers, like I do not have preteens. This is not a thing that I yet have to navigate. So like I will not pretend to have any answers there. But like the way we think about it is first off like I'll say there's what I wish would happen and then there's like what I think is reasonable to actually do as a parent, right? I wish that there was a global law against letting children use AI/social media until they were 18. Like that is genuinely what I think is better for the human race.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, like I think again read the anxious generation, like there's lots of evidence that is causational, not just correlation, of the impact on not just mental health but on like setting children's nervous systems and wiring and whole orientation towards this idea of like defend rather than discover. And I think the biggest impact that we see on democracy most likely is that people that are set to defend are much more interested in having governments that are authoritarian, because that's what they see as the role
Safety.
of parents and other people, is to provide safety and protection to them. And I am not in any way saying that Gen Z is the reason we have Trump or like anything like that, right? But like if you read that book, like there's some pretty clear stuff in there that I agree deeply with on like an instinctive level. So I wish that we could do that. In the absence of that, what he says in the book that resonated for me a lot is that this has to be a collective action solution, right? Like an individual parent trying to stop their kids from using social media or AI just will almost inevitably fail. So how do you build communities of people, which is why Jackson and I are very interested in schools that are zero technology, right? So that you have like a critical mass of parents and your kids' friends who all agree that there are
Yep.
ages at which this is allowed, there are time limits. There's a great movement towards people getting landlines. We just got one. You essentially
Whoa,
like,
fun.
it's not actual landlines because you literally can't even get those anymore, but you just buy this adapter where you take like an old iPhone you're not using with like a SIM card, and then you can plug like an old style phone, like we have a rotary phone, into it so they can like
Oh, fun.
call their grandparents and
Oh,
stuff like
that's so sweet.
that.
Okay.
So things
Interesting.
like that. And then beyond that, I mean, Jackson is working right now on an idea to basically build a city around a school, right?
Cool.
So how do you
Yep.
build larger communities where there is an agreed upon, way to deal with technology and be thoughtful about it in a collective
Right. There is
way?
a collective action problem with all of this, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to anything beyond, like, I can play devil's advocate and talk about the tree roots affecting my basement.
True.
But when it comes to, my nephews are preteen, right? And so it's one thing for them to have limited phone or screen time, but if all of their peers, right? Like I just I didn't have a TV growing up. I didn't have video
Yep.
games growing up.
You do.
So I
Yep.
went down to the neighbor's house and played video games there until I made a nuisance of myself, right? Like
Yeah.
there is it's one thing for us as individuals to decide this is how we as a family are going to handle it, but that doesn't solve it more broadly for, the layers out.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, like, the big thing that I'm thinking about with kids that's so different is that you and I had that childhood. And so we had this preteen era where our brains were very adaptable and flexible, where we learned, over millions of tiny moments, what's an appropriate joke and what's a
Yep.
mean joke, right? Like, what do you do when someone disagrees with you and calls you out in a group so that you don't ruin the relationship? Like, how do you ask someone out on a date without being creepy, right? Like, these really subtle things that humans only learn by trial and error, trial and error, trial
Yep.
and error. And we've already seen what happens when you have something that replaces those opportunities to have those interactions. And that's social media, and it has had crazy effects negatively on people's, ability to interact with each other. We have like way more, kids that are basically shut-ins, right? Kids that have never been on a date, kids that are afraid to take basic risks because they have to interact with other humans. And so it's like, it's one thing for you and I that already have those skills to use a tool like AI. It's another thing for it to become the thing they interact with instead of other humans, because that means they will never learn those things, right? Or they will never, like people writing essays using AI, like it's like Jackson, the best metaphor that he's heard is like, it's like taking a forklift to the gym, something you would appreciate. It's like, yeah, can you lift more weights? Sure, but you're not getting stronger, right? Like, like
Okay,
that's
that's excellent.
that's the
Yeah.
danger. Like, I
Right.
know companies that have fired and are not planning to rehire all of their first level engineers
Of
because AI
course.
can do that. That's great now when you have a bunch of senior engineers who know how to code. What are you
Right.
going to
But
do
you're
in
not going to
five
have the
years
next. Yeah.
when those people have no training and don't exist, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I really was trying not to get like screechy here, but like anyway, that's the bigger thing. It's like you and I can talk as adults about what we would do with it, but what we really need to think about as a society is like what it's going to do to people where it's stealing their opportunity to learn and interact.
Well, this is, as you say, we could easily go on for 4 hours. We are just about at time, but I so appreciate you sitting down with me and exploring. I was, as I said at the start, kind of startled to hear that somebody who I admire and who is technologically savvy is is not using LLMs, is not using AI, and I don't disagree with many of the points you've raised. Right, I do use it. I will continue to, and it is not without a very strong side eye, right? Because I recognize, for example, social media, which I think is less powerful than AI, has had many, many profound and oftentimes negative impacts on humanity to date, and that's just in the last decade and a half.
Mm.
So where we go from here is anybody's guess, but needs to be done with intention. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the chance to talk about it. Like I said, like I'm just trying to have as many of these conversations as I can, and I'm not saying I'll never use it, right? Like I'm not saying my kids will never use it. I'm not as I'm unreasonable to I think it's unreasonable to think that that's really where it goes, but I hope I can present a different perspective. And if anybody wants to have this conversation with me, right, I would really welcome it. If I can, I'll do a quick plug, but my website is leadingbyexample.life. And I have a link there. You can just like find 30 minutes on my calendar, like anytime. And I'd be happy to talk more about this. And I hope you and I get to keep chatting about it too.
We certainly will. Thank you so much, Miki. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to sit down with you.
Okay. You too, Robin. Take care.